So we read the trouble from both sides, trying to lower tariffs on US goods to 10% from 125 That's why China to cut tariffs to Chinese goods to 30%. For 90 days. You're still waiting again. From the Intercontinental over in Geneva. That's
Oui, des milliers de familles réfugiées vont trouver refuge après avoir fui les conflits.
At the same time, we're yet to be, I was just foreign ministry. These are sensitive. 90 days.
We are way below that number. So in some ways, Scott Besson, you could argue Trump wanted this, he wanted a way we needed progress. Told us to buy stocks. Told us we are still seeing the poultry coming out. Scott Besson, the press conference hasn't actually started yet, but just a few moments ago, officials handed out a sheet of paper which clearly has the details on it. Besson says that neither the US or China wanted to decouple, which is quite
Ndio maana vita kisha kule kutoka Manyola tutarudia. Colleagues are working much
detail appears to be a substantial reduction in tariff China. And so getting a market reaction to it, as you can see, it is interesting. Moving down against the US dollar, but in terms of what we're seeing elsewhere, S&P futures spiking sharply on the back of this, and in terms of the European market open, we've now stopped 50 at 2%. This is something of a laggard. 3% down, climbing now 0.5%. The FTSE MIB is up by 8%. So some big gains coming through. There is an area that we're focusing on farm stocks, but in terms of that's not the story right now. The story right now is this big risk on move. We're see a substantial reduction in the tariff limited period of time.
Across the board, stop and send these remarks saying neither the US nor China to couple. In the meantime, we're also seeing comments coming from the Chinese foreign ministry spokesman beginning their briefing. We're still waiting for the US. We are coming out of China. They're losing trying to reiterate as saying they're not wanting to couple, saying they're committed to stability of Sino US relations. Now, as we wait to that commentary, we have a little bit more analysis if we can here. So I do think that the changements climatique, but it's also one of the still very c'est également l'apparition de nouveaux paramètres.
finest. And that's the good thing, like, it's treated by non-aspects, processes. Right? And it's that our reciprocal tariff rates, but I feel like we split it into a 10 under 10 lists. We enter. China for so anything of the conflict to be very clear. Other benefits of the United States is good, like for the past, tariff measures from 2018 are since. Those remain changed to decide. One point is that we're actually states agreed to work constructively together on fentanyl, and there's a positive path forward there as well.
One insider final coming up. Throughout the United States, we don't have the UN calls for India to expand trade and border with China after this weekend. That area situation. So, out. One of the this weekend. I just think to meet the needs of conversation. Whether for reliable
Since 2019, last month, nearly 30 Indian forces were killed during an attack on resorts. An act of doing 30 people were killed. Some officials have now the response. So the exchanges continued without conflict. Odds for the disputed water rights and the British. We have on the ground. And supplies are scarce inside Gaza as Israel appears to be preparing for another military offensive in the Palestinian territory. UN officials are rejecting a further offer from Israel to distribute aid in Gaza via Israeli hubs, saying it doesn't comply to humanitarian principles for independent aid delivery. UN is urging Israel and Hamas to reach an immediate ceasefire and release all hostages. Asking those who are holding hostages to release those hostages. The families are suffering tremendously. It is, of course, a horrible crime to take hostages. This thing, and who's still some kind of mischief. On the other hand, you can also look at old age.
The Chinese
As a bargain and change.
continues to be
Conflict has reached its peak for 2 days with no resolution in sight. Thousands have died in 12 million people from their homes. The number of people seeking refuge in neighboring countries is surging. Eastern Chad has seen more than 18,000 people arrive from Sudan in just the past 2 weeks. Most of them women and children. Chad has taken in nearly 800,000 Sudanese refugees since 2023. Let's take a look at some of the reasons of the UN's agenda.
Conflict stress, global peace come from Australia. We our commitment as founding ideas. We fail to do so, treading the path that we were
General Assembly President Phil Young called leaders to embrace diplomacy for conflict during an event marking the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe. The United Nations was founded in the wake of that conflict.
We at the UN can actually make a difference. This issue that can make a difference to the way AI develops, its use.
Special Envoy for Digital and Emerging Technologies, Amandeep Singh Gill, addressed a special meeting on artificial intelligence. The gathering aims to advance the UN's Global Digital Compact and explore how AI can accelerate the SDGs.
This is great.
I believe that adapting constantly adapting
And that's
is important is really
each by 25% on each other, the Chinese additional not. That has all come down by 115% to 10% each. The United States earlier this year, it was 20% related to fentanyl. That still exists. So you're looking at Trump term 2 tariff on China right now. It's actually 30%. There are prior measures which change by product, by sector, by level, etc. You can't really get a specific number on that right now. What matters for the agreement today is that we each agreed to come down on the reciprocal tariff related retaliation to 10%. So reduction of about 2% down to 10%. Fentanyl is on its own track, but on a very positive track where are safe.
And I would add a couple of things. This does not include any sector specific tariffs that put across all of our trading partners. And as the ambassador said, I think he would with me that the upside surprise for me from this weekend was the level of Chinese engagement on the fentanyl crisis in the United States. They brought the deputy minister for
However, we will face many challenges
public
with
safety,
regard to changing
who is not
dynamic
traditionally
this information contained
the trade team or the negotiating team.
Jens Hilmer,
And he
State
had
Secretary for Germany's Defense
very
Ministry.
robust and
Next week,
highly
his country will
detailed
host a
discussion
gathering on
with
peacekeeping. The peacekeeping ministerial in Berlin will examine how the Blue Helmets tackle the increasing challenges of their mandate and make adjustments for the future. There are currently 11 active peacekeeping missions around the globe. My colleague Shuda Jha sat down with Under Secretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Your Secretary General Lafayette, thank you very much for taking your time. Such a large review. Let me just start with UN initiative for UN peacekeeping operations, where you go to adapt yourself to the efficiency for that.
Thank you for having me. And so,
Of course, the initiative is very important. They've been so worried. Secretary General and Peacekeeping intends to be fully supportive, fully involved, and committed to the success of this initiative. And I believe that adapting constantly, adapting peacekeeping operation is really in our DNA. Because the challenges that we face are self-consistent. This is why the Secretary General always like action for peacekeeping initiatives, and this is why we also are working very hard on the future of peacekeeping. Which there will be an open ministry level meeting in Germany. We have to factor in not only the evolving challenges that we face in terms of the drivers of conflict, in terms of the impact of technologies, of course, we have to also take into account the national community. But in addition to that, because we know that the financial resources will be limited moving forward, we will work towards having a more cost-effective peacekeeping. Yes, very much again. We support you with cost effective. Can you give us some examples? I think there are first is the use of capacities, technology, particularly tools that can help us do the same work, but cost effective. We have all societies and we do also with peacekeeping. Of course, our objective is to be more effective at efficiency, more effective and cost effective. I believe that technology has this is something that we're facing. We have to sorting focus on where they have for the others
are not with China, and we have asked them
what they
to equally something.
because these are, I believe,
Ways in American
avenues.
Let me make
I think
your
that's
question.
also something to keep
Negotiation.
these capabilities on a regular basis.
In the lead up to the negotiation, trying to
Allocating
the channels of communication that had atrophied under the last administration, where,
and I want to insist
for
that
example, the office of his trade representative
adapting peacekeeping
had almost no
succeed.
standing discussion with the Chinese and trade. And although we have significant differences between the cities on trade, economics, and they start complaining. You have to discuss these, have to have a channel for discussions and overcoming that was a challenge. And a lot of work went into that several weeks, so that by the time we got to the we were able to be very pragmatic on these shows. And to be sure, that we're tough things.
Reducing the flexibility. Let's talk. China Customs said that.
But
Organization
getting position in good place. And once we did,
when it comes to peacekeeping, what's your thoughts? Do you think China has? It's of course, yes. I mean, first of all, China is a very important food contributing country. Chinese peacekeepers in the mission. I want to say pay special tribute to their work because they actually install.
Situation. So what has been very unusual at the site,
Weeks that Chinese peacekeepers and together with the partnership. Controversial testing, but it isn't true. So it's a very highly appreciated integration way in addition to design and expected
plate now. I think we believe today, that this whole thing is actually and, ideas I'm taking working moving forward, exactly. Our Chinese counterparts, I believe, they should how the tax policies and if they were utilization, like, what would they should better.
But I would say also, my man, it's just not
That association. The RCN actually takes and also the Moscow actually sparked discussion why what should peacekeeping do? Should they fight back against the rebel groups? It's your take.
First of all, I think it's important to size the we have an area of history, I think, which is pretty offensive. More than 60% of the schools and where it continues to affecting civilians, maybe hundreds of thousands of civilians every day. It's currently intensifying its opposition against this still substantial M23 offensive, which continues, maybe at slower pace, but you know, it has the potential we will instability the last phrase. $7,000 a year to American employees. So we need to avoid this. First of all, we have mandates. We continue to protection is stable. We have we can do this. As I said, every state. So even if the M22 away, civilians, these are the methods. Now, in addition to that, the good news is that there are diplomatic efforts. Regional organizations that are working together. It has been a very good resolution adopted by Security Council, resolution 2773, unanimously, and all the good messages in the resolution. Cessation of hostilities, implementation of the continuous commitments
decade. The WTO and just so that everyone there are other ones that's low tariff, well, I don't tariff barriers. We have that this is $1.2 trillion deficit. The first thing also China, state. So you try all of that standards and just keep saying, well, what but rules have different outcomes.
And this goes this is the world and
We test reality.
Tiny cases. And that's to the front line. And this is all the this is I'm saying a third as we serious
So far, thank you very much for taking your time. Hope we can see you. Four. Look at it now. We're not in April and May. It's reduced to just a tiny square months. UN Insider.
Situation when they were allowed to do it, including previous US leaders. So we are just trying to restore a healthy equilibrium. That the US economy has become very unbalanced. On one side, even and financial market financial innovation. We have the tech sector that but we are a natural resources economy led by energy. So it is a marvel, but in between precision manufacturing, especially precision manufacturing, has been wiped out. And it's not intended to bring that back. So we want to rebalance. I think of manufacturing sector, they have stated, but have not yet rebalanced toward a more consumption-oriented economy. And there is a chance if we can
About
open
70% of the freshwater on Earth exists as snow made ice. 2 billion people rely on water from glaciers, snowmelt, and runoff. Than ever. In 2023, glaciers lost more than 600 gigatons of water. It was the largest mass loss in 50 years. Around the world, glaciers are shrinking or disappearing altogether. Mexico's Humboldt Glacier sits atop the country's highest peak, and it is melting. The glacier's degradation is impacting the surrounding communities in multiple ways.
This is the roof of Mexico. Standing high above the central plains of North America stands 6 Tepetlin. The continent's third tallest mountain.
who was highly respected here.
Known also as the Pico de Orizaba, at over 5,600 meters, this volcano has long been sacred to the cultures inhabiting this region.
To re-engage with
The Mount Olympus of Mexico. The face of the Pico is the Chambito, existing glacier in Mexico. It lies at just 48% of its original length, and it's still shrinking. Alfredo Moran is a local photographer who has a decade observing the changes in the mountain.
The glacier, we have seen over the last 10 years how the ice has been retreating at increasingly faster rates. Crevasses in the glacier being shown finding these cracks of about a slow waves of levels. Sure, this is really good.
And this may not seem to the fall. But the atmosphere,
This probably was never meant to work. I'm standing here facing the information out of the years. The series, the water rises in steam. Forms clouds is transported westward to make this mountains fit within the area, which is covered in trees. And when the clouds pass the high winds, the water vapor condenses in the desert. Each tree represents 3,000 cubic water retention per year. But in this 10 years, 123,000 trees are being cut down in this area. That is the damage we're doing to the region that produces our food.
The pace of global climate change, accelerated by the ecosystem's destruction, is resulting in a decrease in water supply. The forest coverage which supplies water is fast being removed. The effects there, close to the mountain summit, the source of shrunk.
We saw between the US and the United States. We get the market reaction,
But it should be 10 times
swift.
It's been
The
shrinking.
market's gapping higher. This year came across average of the market spending here in Europe, as you can see. Under briefly sharply.
The Pico de Orizaba stands in a place that covers 5,000 square kilometers. High plains, downwind, beneath to the Atlantic Ocean, supplying water to everything the way.
You actually get quite
180 kilometers away. It's the Humboldt River,
the upside next.
volcano is greatly increased.
We are seeing
The
a
Atlantic
market
Ocean.
go up. We are seeing more prices. The Australia is up by
Compared to
8 basis points. With the
It used to be much lower.
up nearly 9 basis points. The safe haven status of that market, obviously, it focused front end of the German market is moving quite significantly. You're getting all these
shortages. One of Mexico's two strengths densities.
There are problems all across this coastal region. Because Pittsburgh is the water source for major cities along the coast. And when the water here is scarce, they are impacted.
This has been from studies by Mercedes Ramirez, the director of the Mexican Hispanic University.
The Great
Barrier Reef was spurred by the tapping of the Humber River.
The dollar
Was enough to supply the city.
We had
But we have noticed that during the dry season,
digest there.
the water in the river is no longer enough because the Humber River has been reduced to a thread of water.
Continuing to rise.
There's a large swathe of Mexico facing serious water problems. The future looks bleak.
The productivity of
The future looks very bad.
down about,
The communities in the high mountains have always practiced illegal logging.
providing this analysis.
Organized crime has become the goal. The deforestation has reached an industrial scale.
It's going to get very difficult for the following generations. Maybe it won't affect us too much, but those who buy this, it's going to be very complicated in many different ways. The soil erosion, resulting landslides, nothing will grow here, a rise in temperature. Just imagine what it's going to be.
What do you really see in this? Changes in that time. And above all, learn how to live the best life. We are now in an age of heavy choice.
Just how volatile things feel. Significant for. We've got innocent community, it's really taking.
The most important thing is public access to information. We need to find the best ways to explain the problems to the public from these adherents. Because while world polos may vary enormously between small communities to those living in larger urban areas, share the same home. So I think
Intention. Right. Still see. We're very much working for these market guidelines made out. This sense that it is on and exacerbating. We already came into that presser. A lot of optimism built in. We get, Wendy's, come on in here. How sustainable is this optimism that we're seeing? You just heard Elizabeth there talk about throwing a little bit of cold water on the sustainability of this deal. What about the sustainability of these games? So we talk about students.
Anyways, the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
Running that this was great. Excelos was a
UN Insider
what I
stands at
expect
its
is major by system. It is just voice like this. Things decided, especially in this. Because that would be the breath, you also just on the type of system. To difference.
To understand and tell the story in
There is a
ways
story that
that digital street understand.
and maybe the trade.
It's very important that the media should contribute to conveying messages about the reality
So
of
we say
today's China.
switch from.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many as it says in its title, inside the stories.
Opportunities for Europe that can kind of take the lead and. I think what's the red area there? You talk about a volatile environment over the next few days. You talk about these kind of fund flows re-entering the United States. What for you is the red flag? Red flag is so much positivity is getting priced in, so kind of equity market going back to there, go to the highs in the US and the they have kind of the area where let's say it's one head. I think they've done this. It's going to be the things that are sector. Russell is looking where it's just
Citizens it's the rationale of the it's not good. I think there's one place on time. Well, simply still.
Sort of see the paint shoved up first. That's the way we get really things about. This is over here, this is over there. That used to import all the stuff from China. 30% still sounds, I suspect, quite a big number, and the US consumers already refrain.
It's still very still number, but we're coming from such a high number that is contributing on the economy. That's to be in the short term. It's less than and if we stay there, and there's not a de-escalation, because that's always a risk that it's 19. What will happen is we're going to be sort of like a if you stay there, then has to be this spending handling the markets, they're going to dip into those like leader of this process for Europe at BNP Paribas 360. This morning, we thank you so much for the immediate reaction. Deals, but thanks.
Which is our size whole.
Negotiate and to try to find a way. Bigger concern for me is the long-term changes in the global economy. So, in many ways, China has already, for a number of years now, been moving the structure of its trading dynamic further away from the United States. Politics and we've seen a real decrease in China's trade with the president going to the United States. We're seeing even China turning to its neighbours, Vietnam and elsewhere in the way through the tariffs. So I think there is a disruption happening with China. It's much away from where is the concern with we hear different speakers that is reflecting in many ways a reality that decoupling is impossible, and it has been, and these tariffs. What China has been doing over a much longer period, what China is continuing to do is to shift the way that trade produces its own energy, in fact, in ways that create effects on
Is it possible that with the number we've got here, what do you think results out of these negotiations leads to a rebound of the US?
This notion of a rebalancing and a change in the economy, that it's really misunderstanding the way that trade rates very fast. Right. This trade deficit has been decades in making. It's a consequence of the way in which manufacturing and global finance has operated really since the end of the Bretton Woods system in the 1960s. So this is the trade deficit is a product set of structures of the international economy, but no kind of tinkering around the edges, even attempts on there's less tinkering and destructive the Liberation Day tariffs. They're not going to be able to redress much longer structural
Trying to increase their property, like the Brazil with Mexico, even the fentanyl story that Martinez even came in. But here's what he didn't mention. He didn't mention the Treasury story. That's what the markets are bringing up. That is the US Treasury Secretary, no comments on that. Regulation, which to me, those are the two red flags that are. We can't mess with that. Brazil now, or some of these emerging markets in terms of the ripple effect. I think this is really important to tell the conversation of what's important there is that that is message speaking to the domestic audience as well. He's very much the flagging connecting the trade with China to a domestic situation and the sentiment story there. In terms of what's happening in terms of the treasuries, the other thing I'll say before I get to Mexico and your question there, it's really, I think, so important. There's two, you're absolutely the absence of talking about the treasuries is in many ways an absence of the sort of, to better word, trump card that China has. In wanting, it could escalate things if it had wanted to. And I think it's not in China's interest to sell off treasuries, to escalate things so financially. It's certainly a possibility. It's within China's interest narratively in terms of politics to present the United States as the one that's been creating. That is a sort of yeah. Because I'm just having deja vu from the first Trump administration because American exportations, it was like in terms of the value. So
I sincerely hope
story in terms of heading there.
planted here will stand as a symbol. This
We've seen again that not just very similar in many ways. China has been shifting manufacturing supply chain dynamics to other parts of the region. So too has been shifting how it sources and its agricultural parts. And this has been a longer term, again, a longer term shift. And we're seeing that real crunch point happen with US farmers. We saw it in the first trade war.
In the silence, that came with time, shoots and elliptic leaves to 5 atoms. A vivid signal. Survival is the future.
China's
The true resilience we find at peace. And learn that you're no
the trade deal with agriculture within the conversation in UK, US trade deal was so precisely because of what you're saying.
If you're sitting change the way
You are the champion of the most marginalized people on earth.
Indicating elsewhere is that there is a real threat within the Trump administration that is seeking to de-escalate chaos that has been. Is a threat that's trying to create a set of norms and a set of ideas underpinning the sections that we speak. I think it's very important, though, if I'm wrong, to keep in mind that this is very retrospective, right? The chaos has already been unleashed, and what Bessel is doing is clearing up the mess. And it's amazing. What are the indications that they have sorted out the United States and China to negotiate? So, keep in mind that it's coming from the place of the commission of this week. So, that is a much important, I think, longer term thing to keep in mind. There are members of the Trump administration, like I mentioned, for others who are doing very different things.
is given 23 years later. To nearly a million security council in Spain, flat to
coming out of London, but it's going to take place in London. That is currently immigration in the UK. But you see, for a number of things, obviously it is significant that the legal inequality is taking a hard time when it comes to immigration, but also the impact it's going to have potentially on the labour market in the UK. Just keep an eye on this. This is a significant factor in terms of the labour market, how you think about the labour market.
Énormément de marches à gauche à droite, un soulèvement de la population, efficace, mais les professionnels, les campien, c'est le campien qui on est là.
Privé, de l'information, la information certifiée.
C'est complexa, c'est comme celle-ci. Un mot de trop, un mot de moins, une virgule remplacée, ça peut remplacer le voyons avec ces aspects-là. On veut surtout relever le travail en équipe. Un très grand travail fait personne ne travaille en électron libre et c'est ça, je crois, qui fait notre force.
C'est les appels qui n'est pas connecté à Internet, pour obliger des idées ici et là pour trouver des sources, mais que tout cela soit équilibré, et avec aussi cette pression questions essentielles, mais également une perspective qui ne doit pas faire du mal au moins et là pour connaître l'unité et le développement de la région. We were addressing storms going the issue of I think that feels really relevant. How's Brussels?
The UK is the but the EU has fallen behind. It's pretty unfortunate forces monitoring how Brussels is bracing. Ollie, the view from Brussels, what it's
Start to see where certain types of
certain types of
ammunition in those weapons.
Scott Bessent basically saying that the UK had shot the front of the line. So too had Switzerland, that the EU has been falling behind. We know that the sort of EU trading relationship with the United States is the
Protests in Bangladesh, it was the interim government itself that requested the deployment.
And it sounds
Visited
like they
hotspots
really have
sites of protesters from universities. We also received more than 900 submissions from individuals.
in terms of expertise. It does not sound like that is happening right now.
Information received
from the
we have
Treasury Secretary,
certain key areas.
they talked about Switzerland, talking about the job they have done. And I remember a couple of weeks ago,
and cross-check information.
received and I think I was also Swiss finance minister,
Understanding from security forces themselves consider functions.
Situation in the U.S. economy, and you actually have heard Scott Bessent talking about the nation of $9 billion talking to these billions of dollars in Switzerland as in the U.S. economy to motivate pharmaceuticals, especially on advanced manufacturing. So those are the sorts of people that seem to be administration, but as for the $1 trillion trading risk, if states continue to fall down the priority list.
Rampant state violence targeted kids that are among the most serious violations of human rights. She's also
and yet there is still carried got from the U.S. coordination from the European side, and what critically non-terror barriers from the Europeans
And senior security officials with a specific role in suppressing the protests and keep the former government.
Which indeed, updating us from Brussels on how the EU is Farm sector. We're anticipating that he is going to sign an executive order related to healthcare stocks are down pretty sharply in Europe. But the big story for the president is going to be his trip this week to the Middle East. ABC News is reporting that he can receive a luxury jet from Qatar to replace Air Force One. But I suspect that we are going to be paying attention. That's what he has to say in terms of policy as well. Let's bring in what we should expect, Jumana Pasechi from the Middle East. Jumana, lay out what the big kind of roadmaps, parts of this trip that we need to focus on are going to be.
Jets. Because technically the US president is not allowed to receive a gift from a foreign government without congressional approval. So you can imagine it's caused a lot of uproar back home, even though the Qatari side say that this is still in discussion phase, nothing has been agreed. But it's certainly to raise the foundation of what is to be expected out of President to deliver to the US. But essentially it's going to be about unity. What's less about industry? There's going to be a Saudi and West Investment Business Summit taking place tomorrow. Some of the biggest CEOs from around the world are flying in. Larry Fink from BlackRock, Jane Fraser from Citi. Lots of discussions about industry, intelligence, potentially partnerships on critical minerals.
John Pasechi joining us, as you can see, from Riyadh. Up next, this is Bloomberg.
So it's quite a myth and an investment has already been done. The agency is already started some analytical work with specific areas for provide safety assessment.
From our studios in New York and San Francisco, our expert hosts have the data and analysis from the companies you know and startups to watch, plus the interviews you don't. Technology. Only daily business from dedicated to that. Right on the trading action. Live every weekday. Because our television. Context changes everything.
up to whenever it happens. I'm David Murray. Canada. And this is the first.
Hello from the SDG studio here at United Nations headquarters in New York. Welcome to this commemorative event on the 30th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Plan of Action. United States investors and Institute for wider. My name is Shakuta Lasal. I'm facts the today. The station contributions of the generations right here. Is every what progress has been made, challenges we face, and needed to accelerate. 1995 and the broader set of sustainable development. Green evidence and analysis was soon released to social group 25. And we have a high level panel to talk about two events this year. The fourth international conference on financing for development in Southern Spain. And the second summit for social development being held in Qatar. How can these events help strengthen the social dimension of sustainable development and accelerate progress? Let's first find out more about the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development, first signed at the World Summit for Social Development on March 12, 1995. For the first time in history, we had gathered and organized social development and the health and well-being of and pledged to give these funds the highest priority into the 21st century. Never before had so many world leaders come together for such a purpose to fix poverty, to create decent data, and to strengthen the central fabric. The central tenet of the Copenhagen Declaration is the at the center of development. At the summit, governments committed to a progressively fair distribution of opportunities and resources to foster social justice and equality. It also called for greater inclusion and participation of 227 economic, social, and political processes. In terms of goals, the Copenhagen Declaration aims to ensure the well-being of all people and become the best functioning of society, notably through its three core commitments: eradicating poverty, promoting full employment, and fostering social integration. The Copenhagen Summit also stands out because of the political will shown by governments to comprehensively tackle social challenges, with the recognition that social development cannot get pursued as a sectoral initiative in a similar fashion. It requires an orientation of values, objectives, and priorities towards the well-being of everyone. It was also at the summit that world leaders clearly stated that economic development, social development, and environmental protection are interdependent and mutually reinforcing components of sustainable development. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development builds on the principles established in the Copenhagen Declaration. It incorporates a broad approach to sustainable development, three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. The commitments made in the Copenhagen Declaration are reflected in the SDGs, particularly in the related to poverty reduction, decent work, and reduced inequalities. The principle of people-centered development is also echoed by 2030 Agenda's commitment to leave no one behind. The Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development was a significant milestone in the pursuit of social progress by addressing key social issues and promoting inclusive, sustainable development. The Declaration laid the foundation for quality of life for all people. Its principles and commitments continue to inspire efforts to create a more equitable and just world now and in the future. And now we have a video message from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development.
Me about the UN is at the foundation of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. Frustration and as this year's World Social in economic insecurity rate along with it creating possibilities to divide people. The challenges demand collective solutions. Certain diversity and regulation. There are opportunities to address problems. The second is some swapping. Let's keep thinking together to make the that important gathering. And help people more justice and put a united world that is desperately to lower that will be out over the next 90 days. That 90 days.
Findings. 25, title policy consensus to accelerate social justice. Let's dive into one social rights now, which is when there's a massive conversation about social issues. For the first time, it's doing just and you lead authors made findings and messages. Emerging trends in the development section at UNDESA, which kind of cities. We tried to thank you for engagement for joining us. So first question. Information that commitments to in Copenhagen, including investigations, and social integration. Because commitments have not been met. But also looking, as I said, to new challenges and social choice and social polarization that we're witnessing right now. But also increasing persistent inequalities. Number 6, prepare for the assessment. So it would be important to present a broad assessment, facts-based assessment of the social system, so that deliberations can be based not on a structured but on the trade. Just please share key findings in terms of data. What are the standard numbers?
Social for the last 30 years. And this is especially so in the fight against extreme poverty. Since 1995, 1 billion people escaped to extreme poverty. This is a very impressive number. And even so, when we think about all the setbacks that we faced since 1995, recently the pandemic. However, the picture is not see, as we showed in the report, 40% of the world's population believes that it is worse now than it was 50 years ago. We try to dive into to understand why this is the case. reasons come forward. The very first one is it is clear not everyone has shared the benefits of progress. Inequality remains high and countries. And currently 2/3 of the world population live in countries where income is less than the second is economic insecurity and is widespread. This is for many reasons. Recent policies, they have shown that and then what just need to open is this high levels of seems to be mistrust and it's distrust is widespread, distrust in institutions as well, and this is delaying social lines and increasing social polarization across the world. So essentially to the report is interrupting the vicious cycle of security, inequality, declining trust in social circulation, and feeding on each other. And ultimately, this vicious cycle is threatening social justice and the foundations for security and
talking about that issue of declining trust. Please tell us findings. So, studies not recently have some more pandemic, but also sort of came from being a long time in the making before domestic process was and so choices on occasion, instead of making things better, it makes things worse. But of course, yes, technological change has substituted quality offers. But there have been certain policies that have made the effects of technological change even worse. With an example, because still, how do we see this? How do we? From the what we call influences. And expecting the fact that we're limiting to prevention of deteriorating so that we can strengthen resilience instead of dynamics and theories and growth dynamics, but both better speakers telling about that time in trust. This form trust is an issue as far as governments go, how people see their governments, but also the changing, right? What's going on?
Yes, so this is one of the anything from paying taxes to paying the law to recycling are affected by changes in trust. And in others, so is and what is more concerning is the fact that this increasing this have no cost whatsoever in development. And so if this see and this was about us versus the others. And this person goes to not like us, that do not look like us, that do not behave like us.
Without its challenge.
And this just in explaining some of these trends,
as we get to the
well
American
known
African
potential Dickinson like advances in technologies widespread misinformation
delivers the marketing data analysis you need live every day.
answer
Changes everything.
I think at the end of the day, it says how people feel about their own lives and how them not just trust. And this also you can tell you this for instance, you can institutions, and there's also a strong relationship it comes with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of economic insecurity, and the relationship between that and trust is there. And we don't claim, we're not making claims of causality, but we show very strong correlations between how we feel and how that gets translated into levels of trust.
It says those conversations are happening.
So I mean,
in a way.
This is something that's a risk of concern,
and in a way, doing so according to
the analysis in the report that a new policy consensus based on several
Going forward, you've got sort out China, Ukraine, the Middle East, big trip again this week. We get investment coming from the Saudis and others. And you've got trade tensions still with Europe and trade deals to do with Asia. It's trying to do a lot very, very quickly and investing policy potentially at times in order just to say these things. The devil in the detail, perhaps trade borders.
And sadly, observing is instead of striving to find solutions, for all we're observing is the rise of nationalistic policies in looking governments across the world. And this is not helping, and the challenges are becoming more entrenched and difficult to address. And what it does show is, at the moment, the international community I'm very committed to progress towards achieving the SDGs. The member states have pledged to finally multilateralism and everything based and striving to a stronger multilateral system. Like this pledge takes place even though today seems that we have less than 6 months ago. So but this is not just a pledge made by government in isolation. France, the United Nations, the international community, but also every single citizen of the world. Everyone needs to play their role if we are to get back on track and achieving the sustainable development goals.
I have a question for you both. International organizations, including the UN, should support national efforts to tackle inequality and social segmentation. So we can stop. Sure. So we are presenting findings from the social report. That's one way in which the UN can help through the production of data and policy guidance that can help governments take more effective policy and cooperation. That's participate in many of today's challenges at all. And let's not think of the most obvious ones such as climate change, but even inequality within countries. Many of the drivers of inequality within countries are global financial flows, trade flows, level regulations that don't depend only on one government, but at the end are set in the global context. All those things require coordination and cooperation. So it provides the global convening space, member states to come together and provide efforts and agree to so I think so that the one is only of this world. Celebration. That's why you went to global targets and monitor you can use national governments obviously, but we can make policies more effective so that they can create what do you say? How can national organizations.
I mean, what I would emphasize is the organization that countries basically what is happening. This cannot be solved unless happens, people listen to the other side of the argument in a positive way.
For electoral training story.
To have somewhere to come together, that is to just agree to disagree. The discussions so actually in the beginning, but this is very progress is changing because the funding accelerated progress, but then we go back to the in the next crisis. So we need to make I have the way to do so is like where the services are all the time they are so we can like another one standing commitment to committing this award. Has limited power to include the working standards and working conditions of filters in their country. You need this whole platform to coordinate action, to invest in labor market institutions, even to real that's another one. The third one is social protection. Far from the goal of some countries can finance universities protection systems by their own. They can adapt to domestic resources, but maybe countries cannot. So we need can sort of concrete commitments to help these countries that provide social protection on their own, and maybe complete decades, which is so important for this country. There's two other recommendations that we make, and those are more important than this. We need to integrate all our policies to address the social challenges we face today. We cannot stay as sectoral policies. Health policies, but we need to stage society and individual gets to do. This is not state situation. Not only drives everybody in its efficiency, right? So hundreds of billions. That's one big takeaway just from the learning that in other states should pay attention to this.
Main Street.
These are very different issues. Like very difficult to say how much people look at that. The truth is, there's a shame on it. It's very ways that sometimes all these obstructions, we can sign on the at the end of the day, and how themselves in their day-to-day lives. And this is the voices and heard against this is a lot because you and so it's important that we pay attention and how you can see themselves in just their lives on a day-to-day basis.
Well, the shopping stuff, they say that's very they say, real life satisfaction, 60% scenarios. That's that they are very soft. I think the report may seem very everyone is out every day going to the car and not today with money many hours for tomorrow. That is funny. And I feel that they are just one step away. One step away from inequality again, a very abstract term. High inequality. But that represents evidence of the way that inequality has had negative impacts on saying stability, social mobility, or economic individuals and corporations that to political process and interests. So all these things have really practical implications for them. I'm talking about I would just say what Patricia said, and that's the vision in terms of that is engaged, but it has equality, economic security, and solidarity at the top of the conversation. And no, thank you. very much indeed for that illuminating conversation. Because it is now, 2025 is a year to advance the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and the sustainable development goals from the 4th to the 6th and South Summit for Social Development. The summit aims to continue the journey started by the 1995 Summit, focusing on advancing competitive policy inclusive and sustainable development. The social summit is apps and reimagining information and social development and the program of action and its implementation. Yesterday, mentioned towards the implementation of the 2030 agenda for development. The second World Summit for Social Development is expected to adopt a concise, action-oriented political declaration. The President of the General Assembly has appointed the permanent representatives of Belgium and Morocco to facilitate the intergovernmental negotiations in an open and transparent manner. The Social Summit, in just a few months after the International Conference on Financing and Development, has been held in Seville, Spain from June 30th to July 3rd this year. That conference will be attended by leaders from governments along with international organizations, financial and trade institutions, businesses, civil society, and the UN system at the highest levels. These space where all these different stakeholders come together, and it will provide a unique opportunity to improve financing at levels, including inventing the full international financial architecture. Help the Kingdom of the United Nations, Excellency Al-Thani, permanent representative of the United Nations, His Excellency to the United Nations, and live from Santiago de Chile, which is Excellency
So it's just a busy way to cross luxury. Or you just say after to say that's great. So it's in the big your insurance. United States
from the average range of correction
they are going to map out the future first to all those dimensions. Says and the fact that says in Doha, vice and offered the space and the resources to and the second was on we have hosted United
ceasefire with Israel. Not say that Alexander President Trump's plan for a phased resolution of distribution of civilians. The United Nations have warned of further humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. The UK is tightening rights and raising requirements for residents for all to cut immigration. The Prime Minister Keir Starmer has introduced a bill
Take this labor issue down. It gets terrible. How difficult this has become, and yet, and the situation where we were then. Then there was the notion that we thinking about social development, it came up that they were, and it was there was cost. And then it was that. But the questioning of the UN is being strong. Obviously, our situation because from our situation, but it was not space.
It's trading accident.
only on smart television. Keeps everything. And the movement event in Jerome John Smith and this everything is the second largest economy. We this spares kind of need to random market analysis and the commercial business China. China show.
Well, right now, there's a lot of now it's 1.2% inflation, 1.3% indicators show we're still pretty small. Yeah. So much. Are you going to because this is what I'm going to do. First thing it's something we should have and things to resolve and lockstep. These assets within your is from business policy. attracting research and you're attracting talent. That is your pathway has been somebody else.
Developments we visited, we manage their members of their advisors and recommendations. And of course, we the society. Yes. And again, it's crisis can be helpful. Our best. We look for reduced floods. That's very important. Was all changes and also now there's the how they're saying something that will like when do you think it first fails? And the time for negotiations will be from April to July, and then finish our work at this time. We in this process we have to be as we said, we will depend on the result of outcome for ALC. And as the Secretary of Energy, you can see the success of Syria will impact success of
Again, it's something we can expect more of going forward into the good but apparently
what has been decided
how big
Syria and decided and so there is a cartoon and there's everything is anti-state. And the fact that UN is working on such important humanity, the time that there is rules for us to show the choice this many things. That's a real chance for the UN. And the UN wars are the for change. States. Many cases showing seems of suffering. And social integration as well.
Maria is a great inspiration for all of us when it comes to the socioeconomic component of the UN agenda. He particularly pointed out that the Doha Summit is an opportunity to create a credible process of follow-up and assessment. So the end game is not the summit. It's what comes after the Doha Summit. So I think this is what we need, creating the momentum and to the point of everything is linked. And this is why we look up to the success of FFD4. Resources to implement the socioeconomic part of the UN agenda is key for the success in Doha. So this is why we are very much looking closely to FFD4 and making sure it is a success. And this is why we are speak together to make sure the Doha Summit is a success. That's success. Congratulations on the outcomes of the financing conference in Spain. Already relatively advanced. What do you see in this? What are the main outcomes?
We are getting very good, high level participation in FFD4. It's a very good, feeling is very good in the now, I think we can reach participation, for example, of 60 head of state or head of government. It's very important. It's very important to participation in FFD4. Like I said, it's a strong message in FFD4. Participation was part of the private sector. But, now, maybe the geopolitical situation doesn't play in our favor. And then we need the leadership of the and the leadership, political leadership as well. For my prime minister is very interested in this process. The 54. The world must reach the 4 trillion annual finance gap correct to the SDGs. It's the message. So, to work with the stakeholders, like UN, because UN, we can work with the AMF, the stakeholders, and this is the best moment to respond to the different points now with the fighting with the multilateralism. So, it's an opportunity. You agree with my dear colleagues. What's going to be the consequence for you? When we go next year, we are going to challenge, So the people they are waiting for us, the member states. So,
the largest city is not thriving. Your state can't thrive, and that is just a mathematical. Because the only way to get the American decade is both of these. That's why we need something.
Thank you. We are very grateful
to make sure the origin be very
demonstrated by member states. Demonstrated by the symbolists.
And getting
some nature is to the secretariat support system of professional
when it comes to
the government was rejected first to the member states in a new facilitators. The secretariat actually have launched inter-agency forces chaired by the American Secretary General.
Tell me what you
task forces conducted online